Hey, what's up, everybody? So, hope you're having a great day. And I'm very excited because we are resurrecting the House of Bricks podcast. So, yes, we are live here, but we took a little 6-month hiatus, too many things going on, and then focusing on LinkedIn live events, which have been extremely powerful and effective. But at least once a month, someone says to me, when are you going to roll out the House of Bricks podcast again? So this is back in action, and I wouldn't pick a better guest to have on today. And if I look like I'm sweating, I am, because it's 100 degrees here in Michigan. Our office is all glass. I'm in a fishbowl, and we have no air conditioning. So just making things happen. In the winter, we didn't have heat. Now in the summer, we don't have AC, but this is startup life, and this is what we do. So you probably see my new shirt if you're watching. We've come out with some brick by brick apparel. Getting asked in the gym, where'd you get that? So really looking forward to getting our name out there. And our name is not about us. It's about how we can inspire other people through the brick by brick mentality, turning obstacles into stepping stones. There is no straight path to the top. It's really that adversity that builds resilience. The resilience is what builds strength, and the strength is what builds great outcomes. So glad everyone's joining us today, coming off an amazing weekend. If you don't follow us on social media, you should, on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere it can be. We're posting, and you've probably seen some of this what the truck thing that I'm talking about. And typical Adam House fashion, I had this green Raptor. Looks like a sniper, should be driving it. However, only shot 3 guns in my life, 2 BB guns in the Cub Scouts, and I think a handgun with my father-in-law. And so I posted about this the other day. It is very important to follow instruction, but even more important, you have to ask the person or yourself, is the instruction I am following the correct one? So I had Josh Kent, a veteran in our community. He's the driver of What the Truck Black Ops Green Raptor, and he was helping my son. So I was like, all right, I'd rather have him help my son, who's 12 years old. And there was another guy, he was a veteran, very skilled sniper as well, but there's a difference between being a sniper and a teacher. So I get right in there and I said, start at 0. I know nothing. So line up, put your eye on the target. I've watched too many movies, put my eye right on the scope, fire 3 practice rounds, no ammunition, loads one in, and you can already see where this is going. I put my eye on the scope. Fortunately, I had protective wear on, and this thing had kickback like Mike Tyson. So what I learned is I will never do that again. But what I also learned is I can take a freaking punch. I stayed in there, took it, and have a scar to prove it. So it's right there, little crack in the nose, but that never hurt anybody. But enough about me. Again, the What the Truck, I'm posting about it all the time. It's not just a vehicle. It is a vehicle that is going to change lives and how veterans are treated every day, right? We have Veterans Day. It should be every day is Veterans Day. And there's a lot of awareness that we're trying to raise through this truck, because up to 50 veterans a day take their own life. And why is that? Because they didn't make that phone call, that one person that may have helped them. So this truck on the road has our branding on it. And when you see it, think about veterans, a lot of them, maybe may not want to make that phone call. It may take you reaching out. I know me personally, I'm the last person to reach out. And when I do, it's oftentimes almost too late. So it's the power of community, a power of being on the same frequency and a mission. So today's guest, Tim Jensen, he's a Marine Corps veteran and a leader in the business community and, for advocacy for the veteran community. He was born in Chicago, Illinois. He serves as the chief brand officer of Grunt Style, which is a fast-growing e-commerce and retail patriotic brand. It's probably one of the fastest growing in the country. So he's also the chairman of the Grunt Style Foundation, hosts several podcasts that are veteran focused. And during his service in the Marine Corps, Tim served as an amphibious assault vehicle crewman then an infantryman, and was deployed in Iraq in September 2004. He's participated in over 200 combat patrols in the extremely violent northern Babel province, and was awarded a Combat Action Ribbon and a second award Navy Achievement Medal with Combat Valor Device. His unit was awarded the Naval Unit Citation for Action in Combat. So, Tim, I want to welcome you to the House of Bricks, and that's an impressive resume. And I know Paul did that on purpose, threw a bunch of big words in there to try to trip me up, but I think I got most of it. So, welcome to the House of Bricks.
Oh, it's good to be with you, Adam, and thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to chat with you and talk about all the things that Grunt Style Foundation, Grunt Style is doing in the veteran community, and a little bit about our business.
Yeah, and you and I have connected a couple times before, and I really love the story and like what the brand's really about. But for you personally, I touch on some of your history. Are there any highlights that you want to talk about as we kick this off?
I would say I've been in this veteran space for, going on 13, 14 years now. And I never would have imagined that I would find myself in this role, in this position of influence within the veteran community. I never would have imagined Grunt Style would be in the position of having this type of influence. We'll talk about it later in the programming. This company is involved in writing legislation that is getting passed and influencing veterans' lives across the country in so many different ways. Never in my wildest dreams. So, here we are, and I've built an incredible group of individuals around me along the way, and just, really doing something that's different and unique.
So we all have kind of that moment, and I've sat where you are now many times in my career, having started now 7 companies, right? When you're in the beginning, you never think you'll get to where you are when you're looking back. What was kind of the big moment that you really knew you had something? You started this business, you're testing, failing, learning, and growing. Was there a failure maybe that you had that was a catalyst? Because I look back and there's kind of that one thing maybe you did wrong or failed in, you learned, and then it was just like set you off to the races.
There's a lot of failure, right? I think, any entrepreneur that is successful will tell you that they have failed more than they've ever been successful, right? Because, success is one thing.
Right.
Failure is all the things to make that one thing work.
Yeah.
And, over the years, I've seen it over and over and over again. This company was started by a former drill sergeant in the Army, my business partner, Daniel Allerick, with the idea of taking, these fundamentals and values that, were imprinted upon us in our military time to the civilian space. What better way of doing that than through T-shirts and, apparel? So that's where the real, idea came from, was, this expression of pride in self, pride in military, pride in country. And, during that time period, 2009, we're in the thick of the global war on terrorism. We're about, 9 years into that. And there's really no brand that existed in the United States at that time that represented the GWAT individual, or just the American military individual, right? There was, Ranger Up, which is a very fantastic brand. I know the owner very well, Nick Palmisano. However, it's very niched, right? Not a lot of Rangers, but there are a lot of American military personnel. So when we came in, we filled that void, and we started speaking directly to that GWAT individual, which is a bit different than previous iterations of the American military. The Gen Xer is it's a very unique person, and they like to be marketed a very unique way, and we found how to do that very effectively. But there was a lot of failure that got us to that point that we connected, and we finally made that $1 million. The company was operating for almost 5 years before it made that $1 million, that first $1 million. So that's there's a lot of failure that, that comes with that. So, I guess the thing, with all businesses is, you have to be okay and comfortable with the idea of like, I will fail more often than I will ever be successful.
Yeah, it's funny. I watched that highlight video before we go live, and I'm like, that was pretty much all the highlights over 30 years. So it was only a minute long video.
Right.
People are like, oh, you started 7 companies. I was like, yeah, I can get through all the highlights in less than 3 minutes. So
yeah. And I've forgotten more than I've done in this company than anything I can remember and cite in such a short period of time. But, it's crazy. Like, once you're involved in something that you're passionate about, like everything kind of just bleeds away, and like it's something more than just a job, right? It's like your life at that point.
Yeah, it is. And you never know when the idea is going to happen, right? You just have to test different things. I've tested hundreds of things here in the House of Bricks, and sometimes people are like, oh, you're lacking focus. It's like, no, I'm trying new things.
Sure.
And when I find the thing, I know it's the thing. So I started to tell the story of how I came up with the truck, right? So I'm driving around. I live in Birmingham, which is one of the nicest cities in Michigan. I don't own a gun. I don't have a horse, and I don't like country music. Why do I have a truck? And so I was like, this truck's amazing. Everywhere I go, people are like, oh, that's the sickest truck I've ever seen. So I'm thinking, I'll put this thing on Facebook. It'll be gone in a minute. So 2 weeks go by, went to a bunch of dealerships. Of course, they want to offer you $30,000, less than it's worth. They don't give you any credit for the upgrades. And so I wake up on a Saturday and I was like, WTF, but I actually said it. And then I said, what the truck? And I was like, wait a minute, what the truck? A veteran should be driving this truck. And so we have veterans in our community in the House of Bricks. That's one of our core pillars of Bricks, is to help them transition from the battlefield to the boardroom. Because when you're in the service, you're being told what to do every single day. Do this, be here, be here, be here. And you get out and no one's telling you what to do. And It's lonely, right? In those first 30, 60 days, you need a tribe. Where's your unit? Where's your team? And so we want to just be that place where they can come in, and it's not handouts, they're hand ups, right? Veterans have pride. They have skills that most civilians don't have. And if they can make that transition like you have, you can build incredible businesses. And so I called the veteran and he was like, I don't want a Raptor, sell it, and I'll give the team to my unit. Like typical veteran fashion. Thinking of the team. I was like, dude, it's not a new one. Okay. And it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about this vehicle being a symbol of how we can support and inspire and be a community for veterans. He's like, I got to talk to my wife. So calls me back a couple days later. He's like, I'm in. So 2 weeks later, flies to Detroit, gets the truck, picked him up at the airport. It was amazing. And the community, everywhere we went, people got behind it. Everyone wants to support veterans, but they really don't know how to do it other than donating to this or that. But people want to feel some impact as well. So it's a movement. We're hoping it goes wild. I'm actually flying down to Miami. He's going down to the Keys this next weekend. So my best friend's a police officer at the Miami Beach Police Department. And so he's going to swing by the department. So it's awesome. But for you personally, you want to talk a little bit about your time in the service and then how you were able to make that transition? Because very few veterans do, right? Like we see the ones like you that now have built something of impact, but what was it like with your time in the service and then that transition period?
Yeah, I think that's very important, right? Because every veteran's, transition from active duty, reserve, National Guard is going to be different, right? And it's really, based on where they're going back to. So, myself, I'm like every other American. I grew up, middle America, a divorced home. My parents were divorced by the time I was, 11 years old. Typical story. I joined the military because my grandfather, there's some influences from him in his World War II background, but mostly it was to get out of where I was at, right? I wanted to try something new. I wasn't college material, right? I had no expert, I had no interest in doing that. I was not to say I wasn't a good student, right? I was pretty clever, pretty smart, but school's not for me. So I joined the Marine Corps at 16 years old in a delayed entry program, and ended up in boot camp right before my 18th birthday, July of 1997. And boy, was that a rude awakening. Everything that I expected it to be was by a factor of 10 worse.
Yeah.
Right? And, I was preparing myself through Full Metal Jacket and watching that show almost every day before I went to boot camp.
That's where I learned to shoot for that movie.
So, I would say my first 4 years in the Marine Corps, were pretty uneventful. I was an Amtracker, I was in Camp Pendleton, and then I was in Camp Lejeune. I got out. My family at the time was living in North Carolina. They'd all moved back to Chicago. So I displaced back to Chicago, became a union carpenter. 9/11 happens, right? I got out in April 2001. 9/11 happens. I'm a carpenter in the city. I'm like, we're going to war and I'm not a Marine anymore. So, I started trying to find ways of getting back into the Marine Corps and found a reserve unit in the city of Chicago. Got in with their I&I staff, found out that the unit was going to be activated for deployment to Iraq, and tried to get onto that whole thing. Learned that I wasn't an infantryman, and that unit was an infantry unit, and they wouldn't take any packs or non-infantry personnel into that unit. So I made a deal to OJT, which is on the job train, for an additional MOS with the 0311 infantryman designator. So I earned that in our pre-workups and deployed to Iraq as an infantry squad leader. And I had a lot of fun doing that. I was in Iraq from September 2004 to April 2005. I was there for the first Iraqi national election, which I'm extraordinarily proud about. And we did a lot of good work there. We heard all the bad people, as many as we could, and made I think a great impression to the locals there on what Americans bring to the equation or any circumstance. And I think that we left them with a great impression. But so it was about a little over 8 years. Some broken time in between that, but I enjoyed it all. I would have done it a lot more, or I would have stayed in a lot longer. But the following deployment from that one was FOB security, and that's not my bag.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your grandfather, so we share that same connection, right? The greatest generation in history, really. That baby boom, culture or generation. But I keep his picture on my desk here. He was just a huge impact in my life. Never really cared about fame or just wanted to serve his country.
Yeah.
So he's in the Army, was a fireman, postman, but he always had a positive attitude, spoke life into me, and said, "Watch out for Adam. He's a sleeper," and he was damn right. So I ended up doing okay for myself. But what really, so, talk about that 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is from when you, left the service, that transition. What were some of the challenges that you faced, and what could have helped you at that time?
Yeah. The first time that I left the military, I think it was fine, right? I transitioned pretty effectively. I got into a job really quickly, that union carpenter job. And I think I was set pretty well, right? I think my second time coming out of the military was a little bit different. And I think it was a lot to do with the combat experiences. The Marine Corps does a really good job of getting you prepared to go out and do some very dangerous and lethal things, right? I felt confident that they gave me everything I needed to do to go kill the enemy. But I don't think that they gave me enough of what I needed to, leave after, having completed all those things, right? Leaving active duty with no combat deployments is one thing, but leaving after a very heavy combat deployment where there was a bunch of loss and, a lot of circumstance around that, I don't think we were really well positioned for that. So when I came home from my second deployment, my life kind of spun out of control. I had a son that was born right before I left, so I didn't, I spent a year really not knowing my son and not having a relationship with that. And I came back and I was being, asked to be a father, a nurturer, right? And I just spent, the last year, 6 months, well, the year training to be a destroyer, and then 6 months executing that plan, right, and destroying lives. To come back and then raise a child and be completely separated from that lifestyle, that was a pretty tough moment for me. And I started to lose my way. I'm not very proud of some of the things that I got myself into. A lot of philandering, alcoholism, drugs, just really bad, destructive behavior. I wanted to die. I was on a cocktail of medicines from the VA. I worked during the day. I bounced at one of the most, violent biker bars on the south side of Chicago at night, just hoping that I would get my ass kicked and that I didn't have to wake up and do it again tomorrow. All the while managing, a broken marriage, my lost my children, I lost a lot of things during that time period. But I also learned a lot about myself as well. I learned the resiliency that I'm capable of. I learned that I do have a lot of discipline, contrary to my own belief at that time, and that I had something left to do, right? And even as suicidal as I was at that time period, and there's a documentary I put out in 2016 that really tells that story. It's called The Bullet, and it's on Amazon. I don't recommend it. It's a gut wrencher.
I was just writing it down, but I'll watch it. I'll be fine.
Yeah, but it was a very dark period for about 3 to 4 years. And I'm thankful that I made it out. I'm thankful that I was able to break away from the medication that they had me on. I'm thankful that I was able to repair a lot of the relationships that I destroyed, mostly with my ex-wife and my children. Today, my ex-wife lives less than a mile away from me, and she came from Chicago. When I told her I was moving to San Antonio, she followed along, and I've been really blessed. I have to say that, considering all the things that have occurred to me, post combat, that I've really had a great network of people, friends, and loved ones. And those loved ones, I really pushed far away from me. They stayed and really tried to make the best of it, and I'm really thankful for that.
So we have a pretty big audience, right, on various social media channels. If there's a veteran listening now that maybe some of the things you're saying you were going through is having those, like, how did you get out of that situation? Did you reach out to somebody? What could you have had?
Yeah, that's a great question, Adam. Like, that's one of the issues that I work on with the Grunt Style Foundation today is the overprescribing of psychotropics within the veteran community. You talked about it in the beginning of your program as the leading into it. Veteran suicide is the leading killer of veterans today, right? Over 156,000 veterans have taken their lives over the last 20 years. Over $500 million this year, my friends, will be spent on veteran suicide, and that will not save one life. That's the hard data of it all. And what we're learning is that it has a lot to do with these psychotropics and the overprescribing of it. And my story is just one of many that is along that path. I was prescribed trazodone, Zoloft, Paxil. I was on this cocktail for a period of time, and it was having some significant impacts on my mental health, to the point where it's driving me into isolation and destructive behaviors. To I did not have a connection with reality. What really broke me from the medication, I was coming home from work one day in the city of Chicago. And it's I lived 23 miles away from the city at that time. It was a town called Romeoville on the southwest side. And it's a straight shot. You take the double nickel all the way out of the city, right into Romeoville. You stay on one road, right? Well, I ended up finding myself onto a different road, and 99 miles away from my house in Portage, Indiana, completely the opposite direction of where I needed to go. And, came to on the side of the expressway, not knowing how I got there, and just had a complete mind zap of the time from when I took my medicine to the reaction. And so the question is, well, why did you take your medicine in the afternoon? Well, that's the way that they prescribe these things, because the way the medication works, you have to take it a couple hours prior to it being effective. And I was doing the same thing. My body metastasized a little bit faster that day, or whatever the case may be, and I found myself in this acute situation. So at that point, I really determined that I need to get off this medication. This was prior to a suicidal event, where I really wanted to fucking take my life. Excuse my language. But so at that point, I made the determination that I had to get off this medicine, and I began a relationship with cannabis. And really, cannabis has been something that I've been using and have had a relationship since that moment to today. And I've been free from psychotropics. I've been much better in my own mental health. Psychedelics has done more for me than psychotropics has ever done. In my relationships with them, and I feel like I'm on a much better path.
So I talk a lot about the parallels between sports and business, just being an athlete, but there's also, starting a business is a battlefield, right? And so even though you're not a veteran and had, those destructive type combat experiences, there's still a lot of collateral damage when you're building a business, right? I mean, you are the business. You're eating, sleeping, living, and breathing it. Everything weighs on you. So I've had some very dark and challenging times as well. Again, everyone just sees the highlights. Look how happy Adam is on social media. Oh, wow.
Right.
And then you turn it off. And sometimes I watch my reels and I'm like, I don't even know if that's me, because I feel in the darkest place I've ever been. And there's just been times in that. So the point is that we can't waste our time in the valley, because that is when you learn the most about yourself. You don't learn anything by winning. Success is a horrible teacher, Steve Jobs says, right? I haven't learned anything from when I sold my company. Okay, great. Now it's on to the next thing. But I learn in the process and the journey. But I encourage everyone. I have stacks and stacks of journals, just of getting your thoughts out. I'm not a therapist or claim to be one, but just getting it from your mind to paper, and then it's at least out of your head.
Yeah.
And the next thing you want to do is go back and read them, because 90% of what we worry about or think about never happens. And so it trains you to realize your mind can play tricks on you. We're fed negative media all the time, negative, comparing to others. So,
sure.
Those journals are a lifeline to me, and then community. I'm a guy, like, if I go to a networking event, I have to come home and sit in the closet for 3 hours, because it just like literally drains me. I don't remember anyone's name. I don't know how many kids they have. I'm just like, all that talking. I'm like, I got to go into a closet and just be by myself. So I'm like a introvert in that way, but do like doing what I'm doing. But any networking events just wear me out. But in those times, being alone with yourself is kind of the toughest thing for people to do. And it can be really powerful, but it can also be really dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
And so I tell people, like, you just need a friend. And, if you're going through a hard time, still get time alone, but, someone that's checking in on you. And everyone says they want to help you. Oh, I got you, dude. I got you. And then maybe one person actually cares, right?
Yeah.
Or they got their own lives, their own issues. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with the House of Bricks community, is just a free newsletter, a connection point for veterans. And again, it's not just a place to connect. It's a place to learn and grow. We have investors in our community, venture capitalists, CEOs, early stage founders. And it is a broad, everyone says, oh, you got to narrow your ICP. And I agree with that. But then you also end up with all the same people in the community. Like if everyone's a veteran, you're all veterans, and 99% of the problems, they're all the same. So having a venture capitalist in there and you have a business idea, he likes a business idea, maybe you get funding, or you're a top CEO and you want to mentor a veteran with a business idea, like that relationship's there. So everyone that doesn't like what we're doing, you guys can truck off. No, I'm kidding. So I'm loving the what the truck thing. I'm like riding
it's good branding. It's
good branding. Truck off, you know. So but all right, getting into the business, and I don't think I had a clear answer. I do want
I got something I want to add to that. Like I think it's very important for just young entrepreneurs in general, is that with all that stress, and it's lonely at the top, man. Like we don't have a lot of especially when you're on the coming up, right? Is you don't have a lot of resources or people in your network that have shared experiences of building a business at the period, at the point in time that you're at, right? So, it's very easy to get lost in your own thoughts, and especially because of the amount of interfacing that we have to do at that level, right? It's easy for us to get lost in our own thoughts, to start ruminating and creating our own sense of paranoia, and that own sense of paranoia then leads into that imposter syndrome, and then the next thing you know, you're questioning all the things that you're doing, and you've given yourself the ips, the deadly ips, right? So you got to be very careful with that, right? And finding those ways of getting all the stuff that's going on up here out, right? Because if it stays up here and it locks up here, then you're stuck in that OODA loop, and it's to your point, it's very dangerous, right? So just doing exercises of just journaling is great ways of clearing the mind and getting all this stuff kind of flushed out, so you're not sitting there and just cycling on it over and over and over again, or beating an idea into oblivion, or whatever the case may be. Like writing is probably one of the best exercises of expression and clearing thought, because you're going through the process of the mechanical skills that are all frontal cortex actions, and it's extraordinarily healthy.
Yeah, and thank you for elaborating on that, because it was I forgot I was on a podcast. I was like, oh, this is good advice, so I just kind of went out of podcast mode. But so just to narrow this one question, what is the one thing you could have had that would have helped you sooner?
Ooh, man. One thing mindset, I guess, because I think about it all, like nothing would have changed if I would have had a mentor, right? Would have accelerated things, maybe, but then I would have X'd out a massive amount of failures that taught me so many things. Mm-hmm. I think my mindset, during the beginning processes and the first 4 or 5 years, if I still had that mindset today, I think we would be a bit in a different place, right? Because as a organization gets older, you lose some of that scrappiness, you lose some of that entrepreneurial risk taking, and you kind of slow down your agility, and you're no longer able to spin on a nickel. Now you're spinning on a quarter, right? And it takes a little bit longer to move an organization. So it's not necessarily what I would have done differently. It's what would I have taken from the past and applied to today. I think is the mindset that I'm trying to put myself back into, is, for the next stage of my company's growth, I need to bring back some of that scrappy entrepreneurial, mindset back into my business to create and push evolution and innovating change.
Yeah, and one of the big things that we talk about, right, is mindset, but it's also when you're not in a good place and you don't have good mindset skills, you don't know what to do, and they're very tough to develop when you're in the valley, right? So, what I see is just having a connection to a community mind or wherever, just be connected somewhere that's growth oriented, right? And you'll be around people on a frequency that you want to be on.
Yeah, I read a lot of books. I'm a reader, and in industrial psychology or in psychology in general, right? There's this idea that you are a product of the 5 people that you surround yourself with, right? So if you're surrounding yourself with losers, you're going to be a loser. If you're surrounding yourself with high performers, likelihood you're going to be a high performer.
Yeah, show me. I tell them I have 4 boys, 18, 16, 15, and 12 now. And I tell them, show me your 5 friends and I'll show you who you are.
Yeah.
Like, that is just a fact. Unfortunately, they all play sports. So they have that drive, they have that competitiveness, but there's always that one friend that sneaks in that I'm like, bro, that ain't it. So, yeah, being around great people that are on the right frequency. So we talk about testing, failing, learning, and growing. We actually have a separate show for that. But like, as you look back in the past, like, what are 2 or 3 experiences that didn't go as planned?
Yeah. I would say the first one was probably my biggest failure. And that's, years ago, 2018, 2019, Grunt Style, we made a decision that we wanted to start our own American manufacturing. And we set ourselves a pretty aggressive state for that. My partner at the time challenged me. He's like, Tim, I don't think you can stand up a manufacturing business in less than 60 days. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, on the 60th day, I don't think you'll be able to have a product that we can take to market and sell. I'm like, are you challenging me?
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, I bet he can.
Right. And so at that time, I knew nothing. Right. Just like I knew nothing about screen printing when I was asked to stand up the screen printing business. But I learned it and I figured it out. Just like this, I went to the professionals. I figured it out. Set up a manufacturing shop here in San Antonio. I learned that the Levi's plant that employed a significant amount of people here, never displaced. They're still living here. So started putting out information and messaging into the local San Antonio area to bring those people out. And next thing I know, I've got a staff of 30 individuals, mostly from the old Levi plant, and the barrier to learning was nil. Right? Because they all had those skills. They just needed to be sharpened up, right? And most of them were still doing that stuff, for other companies. So, we started testing and we started making, and I'm buying linen from rolls, dyeing it and having it brought in, back to us in rolls. We're unrolling it, cutting it, putting templates on it, stitching it all together, putting buttons, all the parts and pieces to finishing. And on that 59th day, I still have it. I still have it in the bag. On that 59th day, I produced the first Grunt Style marketable long sleeve shirt. And I was quite proud about it. And, that was a turning point of our business. We stood up an American manufacturing, using all American employees. And, that was going really well. And then we hit some, really bad cash positions coming into 2019, and we had to shut the whole thing down. And that was, probably in my total career, the worst part that I had to ever go through as a leader, right? And I've lost lives, as a Marine leader in combat, but we knew what we were going into. We knew that lives were going to be lost. I think this was a little bit different, for me, in a learning situation of having to lay off an entire division of people, that I just stood up and I was so overly proud of, and and screaming from the rooftops that we were able to accomplish this thing. And then less than 60 days later have to shut the whole business down. So the whole life cycle of that thing was like 6 months, 6 to 9 months.
Right.
And that was a very tough situation for me, and it still makes me sad to this day.
So I've, over the last 12 months, probably talked to 600 founders, and I saw some of the notes you submitted in preparation for the show, and I laughed. You're like, we ran out of money. Like every founder, like,
every time.
You're not a real founder if you haven't run out of money. So I remember I had my healthcare analytics business, and our burn rate was like $100,000 a month, and this guy was going to invest $5 million Series B round, kept putting it off. We were down to zero in the bank account on Wednesday and had an $80,000 payroll Friday. Yeah. So
you haven't lived unless you had to scrap for payroll.
Yeah, that's it. That's when you become a founder. And the guy wired in $5 million on Thursday, did payroll Friday, and that company ended up going public. But no one sees that. They see the press release of Qualmetrics closes $5 million Series B funding round. Everyone's like, you must have been so. I was like, I'm barely alive. Okay. Yeah. I didn't, when it hit, it wasn't excitement. It was just a big relief that had slowed down. So tell us, again, just, we kind of have the story of you personally, the business. Where is Grunt Style today? And what's your vision now? Because even like you said, when you reach different levels in business, there's like arbitrary revenue numbers that I've just seen as like a pattern. 0 to $1 million, $1 million to $5 million is your next bucket, 5 to 10, 10 to 25. Those are kind of the jumps that I see, friction points, and then breakthrough. But where is Grunt Style today, and what is your vision for it, 5 years from now? Where do you want this to be?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Today, Grunt Style is the largest veteran patriotic apparel provider in the entire country, hands down, bar none, full stop. Right. And I don't think that there's anyone that's even close to us in providing a value, quality product, as well as a community as rich as what Grunt Style has produced over the years. We're coming up on 6 million social media followers. All in on a push of a button, I could speak to 12 to 13 million people within our profiles. We have a substantial audience that this company has put together over the years. Why? Because we built a very authentic relationship with the end user, right? As I mentioned, earlier in the podcast, there was really nobody in the space when we came in, right? And it was for the taking. And I like to make metaphors of it, or similes, or examples of like saying, hey, it was like the early 1800s, and it was the gold rush. Like everybody's racing to California, right? Well, we were racing across the plains, right, with no opposition in front of us. And what we ended up doing is we started showing the veteran space, like, hey guys, like, look at this, can be done, right? Look what is possible. And from there, you start seeing all these other brands pop up, 9 Line, Black Rifle Coffee, yada yada yada. The list is long. And there's some of those that have done well. Black Rifle Coffee Company has gone public, right? And then you got other companies out there that are just trying to fight for the space that we've already won. So I think the brand is in a very great spot, to continue to deliver quality premium product to a very bought-in audience. And we continue to build that community bigger and bigger every year, right? We say here at Grunt Style, if you are a patriot, if you love patriotism, if you are willing to die for your country, then we have a tent for you. Come party with us here at Grunt Style, because that's where all the fun is at. That's where Americana is happening. And where do I see the company in 5 years? Well, I hope to see it continuing to be the leader in veteran patriotic apparel, right? We're right now a $125, $130 million business, right? I think in 3 years we will be a $250 million business, because the growth is showing that direction. I hope that the Grunt Style Foundation, which is such a pivotal part of our organization. Honestly, Adam, if I could be completely honest with you, I hope in 5 years that I've shut down the Grunt Style Foundation, because we've achieved all of its mission objectives. We've reduced veteran suicide. We've expanded veteran healthcare to capture all the exotic cancers that are killing the GWAT cohort, which we did with the PACT Act. And we want to bring alternative modalities to therapy. So psychedelics and hyperbaric chamber therapy. If I can achieve all those things in the next couple of years, I'll shut down the foundations. We've achieved all of our objectives. So we are a business of action. Here to build community and really put a light to the global war on terror veteran who came out of middle America, USA, to stand up and fight for what they believed in at a time where the world was upside down, and we were caught in the middle of a religious war that we've never expected. So I think those Americans need to be recognized and never forgotten. It was the longest war of our history as a country, and some of the greatest Americans, I believe, the second greatest generation is within this cohort. So that's where I think that we can, where we are today and where we're going in the future. And I ask all of your listeners to join us for that journey, and bring us along with you as you're going along your own patriotic journey.
Yeah, everyone should. And I, first of all, love the mission, what you're doing. Secondly, there's a lot of great missions out there, but they have a terrible business. That is not you. So a lot of places people donate to, they have no clue where the money's going, how it's being used. I mean, I'm only an inch deep into this, but the more I learn, the more I shake my head. Like, I just learned that they have to pay for their own uniforms in the service. I was just like, I'm trying to wrap my mind around these things. Or a guy that got injured and the Army wouldn't release him so he could get a job. Then he was going to lose his house. And so he had to get a side job, like cutting grass. Like, it's unreal. Like, when people leave my company, I treat them better than that. And maybe even if they've been here 6 months, like, you try to help them transition, get them another job. Like, it's just, you're either in or out. And then when you're out, like, it's just like you're out on your own. And what was the number you said? Like, I tried to write it down, but I think my pen ran out of ink. How much do we spend on veteran suicide prevention right now?
Yes, yeah, big number. So this year in 2025, the Veterans Health Administration will spend over $577 million on suicide prevention programming. That's just the suicide prevention programming. That the total line item budget for the VA for 2025 is something to the tune of $3 billion.
And you don't think it's making an impact? Not
one bit. I have, February 28th, I put a press release out challenging the new Secretary of Veterans Health, Veteran Affairs, Doug Collins, in a very positive way, to investigate the Department of Veterans Affairs, right? If in the last 20 years, we've spent over $1 trillion on suicide prevention. Where is all the money going? And why are we not seeing a reduction in why is the numbers not going this direction? We're seeing them go this direction. Last year is like 6,300 deaths, right, by suicide in the veteran community. This year they're anticipating over 6,400. So we're not going down. That money is not doing anything. There's 40,000 veteran service organizations in the United States that all say that they're geared toward veteran suicide. What the hell are you doing?
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like I said, the more I get into it, and there's a lot of organizations out there that claim to help veterans, but it's like all charitable organizations. You dig in a little bit and the numbers don't add up. And we all know that prescriptions are not the answer. They have to know that. If I know that, I'm not very smart. You know that. People I know that. How come they're not making a change? And it actually costs less to do it the right way than it does the way they're doing
Yeah,
it.
think about this. This is not a new problem for the VA and what's happening into the cohort, right? So there's about 18.5 million veterans in the United States. The VA, is right around 48%. Administrating healthcare at about 48% of that number. Of that 48%, so that's what, just short of 9 million, right? Of that 9 million that's currently receiving care in the VHA, here's a startling number for you. Almost 70% of them are being prescribed psychotropic medicines. 70%. And we are scratching our heads here every day wondering why the suicide epidemic is so high. When we are prescribing veterans who are already suicidal, who are coming to the VA, talking to these healthcare providers saying, hey, I am showing suicidal tendencies. I need to get some help. What is the first thing that we're doing to them? We are prescribing them medicine that increases their suicidal ideations. That is absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And it is happening every single day. I have 3 employees that in the last 60 days have come to me and said, Tim, does it seem strange to you that I went to the VA because I was, I needed some help in a mental health circumstance, and the first thing that they want to give me was a prescription for Klonopin? I was like, absolutely, that's a problem. Absolutely, that's a problem. And I hope that you're not taking that medicine.
Right.
And they're not. Right? I'm not.
But if you weren't there, they would be. If you weren't there, they would be. Right?
Maybe if it wasn't for the information that we're sharing, they certainly would be, right? And that's the most important part here is I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be a doctor, right? But I know I was on this medicine. I know what it did to me. I know that what it's done to several of my friends that are no longer with us that have taken their lives. I've seen what it's done to umpteen number of people. I know that 70% of the VA veterans in the health administration are on this stuff, but we don't want to put a finger and say, well, that's the problem. Well, it wasn't but 10, 15 years ago, the same numbers were being present in the opioid crisis in the veteran community, right? 68% of the veterans in the VHA were addicted to opioids. 68%.
Right.
So what did they do? Well, they changed their opioid policies and strategies and solved the problem within 18 months. Mm-hmm. Why are they not doing it to the same? Because they've, in my opinion, they've taken the pharmaceuticals and they've replaced it with psychotropics.
Right.
And because for the simple fact that the VA and Big Pharma, AstraZeneca, go down the list of all these, Glaxo, Wellcome, all of them. They all have an unholy relationship with these people, with this organization. There's an organization called Endeavor that operated under a name called it's escaping me right now. But they were operating under another name because they got sued into oblivion and had to change their name. But they were testing on veteran the prison population in the state of Kentucky, these opioids. And when the state of Kentucky said you're no longer allowed to test on these individuals, who did they go to next? It was the veterans. The VHA opened the door for them to come in and start testing these medicines within that cohort. So, these are not new problems. These are, this is the relationships that, all these organizations have with, this cohort of 9-some million people that, looks like the VA just sells off whenever they have an opportunity.
Adam just lost power for a second, but it sounds like he's logging back in. So.
Oh, right on.
Well, thanks for the work you're doing, Tim. Back in the day when I was running a nonprofit, we were challenging the VA because in the manual, they weren't offering EMDR therapy because they had this alliance with University of Minnesota for the behavioral techniques that they created. Right. And so they were limiting one of the highest percentage therapies that we were offering locally, but then it was blocking us for funding. It was and it actually heals people. And so like we had this campaign to stop that. And it worked eventually, but boy, it's a big ship to turn.
Yeah. We see this with HBOT, right? Hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy. This form of therapy has an extraordinary means of addressing soft tissue damage, brain damage, TBI, CTE, PTS, all these different ailments that are very specific to the global war on terror veteran, due to IEDs and concussions, explosions, all these different, exposures. But, we don't want to give the veteran that access in the VHA. In fact, Paul, what we want to do is we want to restrict their capabilities of getting access to hyperbarics to the tune that nearly 750,000 veterans have lost their life after amputations due to diabetic foot ulcers that would have saved their life if they would have had access to this within the first year of that amputation. But we deny them that, and then they die, and we don't have to pay out on those benefits. Crazy.
Right.
750,000 veterans have lost their lives to that. That is just like, what are we doing? Like, do we not value human life anymore?
Yeah. So I lost power. I think I was telling someone this morning that we didn't land on the moon. So maybe I think, they shut me down.
Targeted.
We didn't let target now. So, I think they just reset the AC. But let's wrap up. Quick fun fact. I got to get this out. There's a little something you put in the notes here of something you did prior, had to do with wrestling. So tell us that. We'll wrap up.
I've been involved in a lot of crazy things over the years here at Grunt Style. I like to think of myself as a disruptor, and trying to always get in front of a camera. During COVID, there was a moment in time where that presented itself in a very unique circumstance. There was a former Green Beret that had reached out to us and was interested in a professional wrestling career. I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, would you want to be an influencer for Grunt Style? Like, what do you want from us? And kind of danced around that subject for a little bit, and it started to get a little bit more serious. And I said, well, okay, what does this really mean? So there was an opportunity, and so I put together this tag team and started working in these high schools around Phoenix, Arizona, and doing these little small time shows that then took us to Salt Lake City, and then finally to Jacksonville, Florida, where we participated in AEW and made wrestling primetime, wrestling on national television as the Violence of Action. It was myself as the ringside manager. We had a Green Beret and a Army combat engineer as the two wrestlers. And it was quite fantastic. Paul, Big Show was called one of our matches with Tony Schiavone. And it was really cool. So we did three appearances on national television as the Violence of Action.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Tim. The Violence of Action. Apparently, Adam's
technical difficulties,
having some issues on the other end. Let me see if he can hop on. I don't know if we're gonna be able to wrap up. Oh, there we go.
All right, one more time.
Again. You missed the story. You're gonna have to catch the replay. Adam.
What's that?
You missed the story. You're gonna have to catch the replay. That.
Oh, you already told it. Perfect. So we can fix all that. We'll probably lose power here, but Tim, want to thank you for joining. Love Grunt Style. Love the mission. Anyway, House of Bricks can help you out. Anyone listening out there, check out Grunt Style. And they're actually cool clothes. So there are mission-based initiatives out there that have shirts and clothing I would never wear, like the stuff you go to get at conferences. But it's great stuff. Even my teenage boys like it. We're throwing some orders in. So really appreciate what you're doing. It's a great business, but an even better purpose. And we want to come alongside you guys in any way that we can to just save that, one person, right? That's what I
That's
tell
right.
people all the time, I never wanted my name in lights. I don't care about followers or views, but there's one person out there listening that this is the time they needed to hear that there's someone that's been in their situation that needs help. Make the phone call. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. A lot of people have been where you may be. Make the call, get help, get connected to a community. We're a great brand like Grunt Style.
I think we lost him again.
It's now your show, Tim.
Well, guys, welcome to Grunt Style for the last. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, guys. In all honesty, great show, and I really appreciate Adam and the House of Bricks for bringing me on. Paul, thank you as well. I want to say thank Evan Guzman for making the connection. Another great friend of the brand, and for everybody listening, Grunt Style is, you can find us at gruntstyle.com. You can find the Grunt Style Foundation at gruntstylefoundation.org, and all the things that we're doing in the community to bring change. And listen, like, if it's not Grunt Style, you can find another company that is out there doing amazing and incredible things. We are living in a time in America that sitting on your hands is no longer an option. So get off your fat, lazy ass and go do some great stuff. And that's all that I think that we're expecting here in America is a little bit of revitalization of hard work and good effort, and we can get ourselves back into a place of prominence.
Well said, Tim. Thanks a lot. Thanks for everyone who joined. We'll be sending out some highlights of this and ways to contribute to what Tim is working hard on, and hope everybody supports. Thanks for your time, Tim. We'll be in touch.
7 for 5, guys.